Okay. So Dr. Bob Kroll is a board-certified veterinary neurologist, for you who don't know. He received his vet degree from the University of Minnesota and a master's degree in comparative neurology from the University of Missouri. He has practiced clinical veterinary neurology and neurosurgery in Portland for 24 years. He and his wife, Nancy, moved to Cannon Beach after retirement, and he started the Cannon Beach Disaster Animal Response Team, or DART, in 2017. And he's also on the leadership team of the Cannon Beach MRC. And he's also, for those of you who don't know, a very accomplished wildlife photographer.
Thank you.
So I'm going to give it to you, Bob. Go ahead.
Maybe what I'm most proud of, I'm not sure. But I was going to say I forgot to put that in the bio. So I love photography. And so I think several people in attendance tonight have heard some version of this talk before. So don't feel compelled to stay if you feel like you've heard it all and you're ready for dinner or whatever. But I'm going to share my screen now and start my PowerPoint. Let's see. Are we there? Okay, it says you can see it.
I can see it.
And I'm going to see if I can move some of these things out of the way. Because they're blocking the slide. Anyway, this is about disaster preparedness for pets, and the Cannon Beach Disaster Animal Response Team is a group of volunteers here in Cannon Beach that are trying to be prepared for helping to shelter pets if we have a disaster and be prepared themselves and help their family and neighbors be prepared. So these are the things I'm going to go through tonight, with some spending more time than others. Just a quick slide about some definitions that I think are valuable. Talk about the assorted disaster risks that we all face. Talk about kind of specific concerns related to animals. Talk about the history of why the country, the U.S., has decided it's so vital to be prepared to take care of the animals as well as the two-legged animals. Nancy was just bringing me a glass of water, but I already had one. And talk about what you can do to be prepared, and then tell you a little bit more about first definition, we're familiar with the worries of disasters, anything that's directly property, operations, or our environment. And the management of disasters is an ongoing process where we need to work to prevent, mitigate, be prepared for, be able to respond to, and then ultimately recover from whatever the incident is. The definition that I think is really valuable, one I like, is that we are the first responders, especially in if there's a Cascadia event and there's lots of devastation and there's a large regional thing where we may not have very many first responders available to us. They may be responding elsewhere. They may not be able to get into our community because the roads are broken. And so we are the help before the help arrives. That's a quote from Brock Long, who used to be an administrator of FEMA. And it really hits home with me. So what risks are we likely to face? We all, the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami are what we all really train for as the worst case scenario. However, there are a number of things that are possible. We are in a volcanic part of the universe. We've got mountains not that far away. I just got back from Yellowstone, and it's amazing how many, hot pots and geysers and everything that really tells you that there's a lot of volcanic activity going on underground. We all are familiar with windstorms, and even the tornado that hit Manzanita. Extremes of temperature. We experienced a pretty good ice storm recently. And then we worry about human caused things, wildfire can be caused by a person and we're right up against the forest. I think that's a real concern in this area. Or even, terrorist sort of activity is possible. So all of these are things that we could face at any time. The concerns involving animals in the face of a disaster are several. There are public safety issues, health issues, both for the pets and for us, food security, welfare of the animals, service animals, captive animals if they're, you're in a city with like zoo animals, for instance, or wild animal parks, and then the wildlife in the area. And I'm not going to spend much time talking about all of them, but spend a little more time on the ones that I think are more important for us. We know that people are very attached to their pets. It's sort of from the time of our grandparents and then our parents, pets have become so much more important, and they really are children or children's substitutes. They're really part of our families. And people put themselves at risk to protect their animals in a disaster. If they can't evacuate with their pets, they may not evacuate. They may stay home and say, I'm not leaving if I can't take my pet. And that puts first responders at risk because they may have to spend more time trying to convince you or have to come back into an area to try to get you to evacuate. And that also takes them away from other vital functions that they should be doing. And this is true whether it's a dog or a cat or a horse or, farmers, ranchers, food animals or dairy cows or whatever. The kind of big example of that was in 1996 in I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, Weyauwega, Wisconsin. There was a big train wreck, a train derailment and spilling of hazardous material. They caught fire. The entire city had to be evacuated.
The farmers
and people that left couldn't bring their pets, and they were very demanding trying to get back in, but were not allowed. And finally, the National Guard actually got activated to help them go in and get their pets as safely as possible. But they were out of their community for, I think, more than a week. And just within the last couple of weeks, a new article in a journal on kind of the relationship of people and animals called Anthrozoos found this was done by a public health department and looked at a lot of different research, and definitely people put themselves and their pets in peril in the face of a variety of things. They are reluctant to leave, and this was focusing more probably on domestic violence, and people will stay in horrible circumstances because they worry about what will happen to the pet if the pet can't go with them. And in fact, there are lots of examples where, sort of the brutalizer in a domestic violence situation will harm the pet, almost like a revenge or torture thing. For the homeless, their pets are really important. They take great care of them, but if they can't take them into a shelter, that puts them at risk. And then certainly natural disasters.
What we need to do.
Jara, would you mind muting your microphone?
Sorry about that, Gary. Okay, all right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You're talking to me. I was talking to my husband. I'm sorry.
Let's see. There you go. I was able to mute you. Anyway, so this is very stressful psychologically, and it is important for legislative bodies, municipalities to consider pets when they're making policy and creating shelters and other things. So public health with regard to animals is very important. Zoonotic disease or also called a zoonosis, is any kind of infection that can move between four-legged animals and us two-legged animals. You know, in the human healthcare field, they worry more about going from animals to people, but it can go either way. And certainly, we think that coronavirus probably came from animals somewhere, COVID, but there also have then been animals that have been infected with COVID from their owners. So definitely a public health issue, and it's important to be aware of this in helping to prevent the spread of disease to people from animals. Something that's really interesting is that they estimate that 60% of all infectious diseases that we're aware of and 75–85% of the new emerging diseases have come from animals. And the number of diseases from biting insects has more than tripled in the last 20 years. We've heard about Zika in the news, a whole bunch of new tick-borne germs that have been identified in the recent years. And so it's really important for all of us to have an understanding of the risks and ways to protect ourselves. Here's just a short list of some zoonotic infectious diseases that we might have heard of. Rabies is the big scary one. Anthrax is one that might be involved in a terrorist act. Giardia we know about, beaver fever, plague, you know, things from rodents after a disaster in an unhygienic environment, all need to be a concern. So how do these diseases spread? A variety of ways. It can be direct contact, touching the animal, something that your pet carries in. It can be indirect contact, like handling their food or their waste. Vectors means insect transmission. Your food or your water can be contaminated. And we know, just like with COVID, little ones under 5, the elderly, I hate to use that term because a lot of us listening are over 65. Those, I shouldn't say elderly, those over 65, but the older we get, probably the more risk we are at, and as our immune system weakens. But anyone with a weak immune system and pregnancy all adds to the risk. And you know, we all learn it. The number one way to protect ourselves is to wash our hands. The second and the third way is also to wash our hands. But things that we can do to prevent insect bites are important. So whether that's using a repellent spray, tucking your pants in your socks when you're hiking in the woods, all those kind of things, remembering safe food and water handling techniques, washing your hands after handling animals as well as their food, trying to protect yourselves and kind of understanding pet behavior to minimize the risk of getting bitten or scratched. And, you know, I'm a big advocate for people picking up after their dogs on the beach because of the risk of spreading disease. And, you know, people are walking barefoot, they might carry something home, even that would infect their pet, or their pet might walk through something. So it's really an important thing to do. Food security. Agriculture is a vital part of, you know, the country's economy, of our health, both, you know, meat, vegetables, dairy products, all of it. And during a natural disaster, livestock are at risk of getting sick. The stress can add to their risk of getting infected, just like it can with us. And as well as concern about food shortages. So it's something that needs to be considered, and less so in a small, you know, I think of, for those of us on the coast, the Cascadia event is going to sort of be a local event, but it's going to be a huge event over the Pacific Northwest. So lots of things are going to be affected, although we're not going to be worried about livestock in our communities. And as I mentioned, terrorism is a concern. So agroterrorism, where diseases are introduced that can result in illness of both animals and people need to be a worry. Probably the big concern for us is just the health and the welfare of our own pets. And during disasters, there are a lot of different traumas, stresses, diseases, hazards that can affect our animals. And it's really important that we plan for it to try to mitigate it and minimize it. Important to remember that virtually none of these animals, unless they're used to living in the wild, can fend for themselves. The wild's been taken out of all of our pets. And so we need to be there for them. The kind of things we need to do to plan and prepare for care of animals. First is shelter and control. So, you know, getting a roof over their heads when they're not used to living outdoors. And so we prepare here in Cannon Beach by caching away a variety of shelter and care supplies. We have a lot of cages. We need to be prepared for food. Those of you that are in, whether you're an MRC or CERT, if you've got a backpack that you're a volunteer with the community, I think it's really valuable to throw a couple of those sort of disposable or free leashes that you get when you go to the veterinarian in your backpack, and maybe a few treats. So if you're out in the community and you see an animal loose, which is likely to happen, you can help collect them and deliver them to a pet shelter somewhere where they can eventually be reunited with their owners. We need to be prepared with food and water. Identification is so important. Think about the medical care of your pets and having the medications, as well as sanitation and disease prevention. And I'm going to talk about kind of all those things a little bit more. Service animals, there are probably a few service animals in the area. We certainly have tourists that may come and bring their guide dogs, their assistance dogs, and then even just the emotional support dogs that have additional needs. You know, there are dogs that are trained to visit. There are medical alert dogs for seizures, and we need to help the people care for their animals that are providing that kind of support. And then law enforcement and emergency response can have animals. And search and rescue, they're used quite heavily. A good friend of mine actually has kind of a emotional support dog for disasters. She and the dog have trained, and they are deployed nationally to big disasters like school shootings after the fact, and the dog just wanders around and lets the the emotionally distraught people hug a dog and get support. So we may have something like that show up in a disaster, and we need to help with that. And obviously, horses are involved with the police department as well. And I don't think we're going to have a big worry with wildlife in our area if we have a disaster, although we do have, the elk, the deer, the coyotes, the cougars, bobcats, things like that. And so we certainly want to be aware of sort of disease prevention. If we have, we're end up drinking water from the creeks that are running down from the hills, or if the animals are displaced because there's a fire in the woods or something like that. We just need to kind of keep our eyes open and think about these things. So animal issues in disaster certainly go far beyond basic humane concerns involving safety, health, economic issues, environmental issues, a lot of things to think about. This really, I mentioned the train derailment, and that was kind of an early thing as far as our national awareness for being prepared to take care of animals in a disaster. But it really came to light in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. They did not allow pets to be evacuated with their people, and many people refused to evacuate because of the animals. Again, it put first responders at risk, it put these people at risk, and it got lots of negative media attention. Lots of things with Katrina got lots of negative media attention, but subsequent to Katrina, the Congress passed what's called the Pet Evacuation and Transportation Safety or Standards Act, PETS Act, and it required states to develop plans for evacuation of pets. Subsequently, when Hurricane Irma hit Florida, they found that those efforts made a big difference. Many of the states had developed extensive plans for caring for the pets. There was little mention in the media, and most of the evacuation and sheltering of the animals was very successful. So just a note about this PETS Act, it was an amendment to something called the Stafford's Act, requires both state and local municipalities to plan for household pets and service animals, not so much for food animals and such, but that is often for the states that ends up being part of it, which is great. This also benefits all of us because then FEMA helps share in the cost of the service to support this in preparation and response to a disaster. And although the last point says the FEMA director helps contribute to preparedness, certainly trying to lead a team that is designed to prepare for a disaster rather than after the fact, after the disaster and response. There's so much more money available for response efforts than to help us be set up for preparedness. So it's a struggle to figure out how to support our efforts and purchase our supplies. Oregon certainly followed suit by requiring enforcement of the PETS Act, and many other states as well. This map is several years old, so it may be that even the light-colored ones that were not initially involved have done so since then. Pet ownership in Oregon, the most recent numbers I have, you can see from the pie chart that a good majority of people consider their pets to be true family members. And almost all the rest of the people consider them to be vital pets and companions. And very small percentage, very few people think of them as property, although from a legal standpoint, unfortunately, pets are classified as property, so it's hard for somebody to sue for emotional damage if, you know, a veterinarian screws up or something. But it just this chart shows how important the animals are to all of us. And based on the population of Oregon, you know, there are over 600,000 households with pets. We know that 60–65% of households have pets. And based on information from the American Veterinary Medical Association, on average, there are 1.6 dogs and 1.8 cats per home. So there are a lot of animals in the state that need to be prepared for. And here in Cannon Beach, our most recent census, we had almost 1,500 full-time residents. So, you know, that's over 700 dogs and almost 1,000 cats, plus the exotics that I'm not really aware of. But if you think about a tourist destination like Cannon Beach or Manzanita or Seaside, on a busy summer day, and especially something like Sandcastle Day, I have 1,000+ dogs could be here. I'm guessing 2,000 isn't unlikely either. So if we happen to have a huge catastrophic disaster happen on those days, I don't know how we're going to take care of all those animals. And so the odds of it happening on that day are probably not real high. So I plan to, at least I start trying to plan for the ones that are residents, and we'll do the best we can to take care of the visitors. The state provided me with the numbers at the bottom that they think that about 5% of the resident pets will need shelter, like their homes are destroyed, they're separated from their people. The people, when they evacuated, were not able to take their pets. And about 20% of the animals will need to have food, commodity support to help the people keep their pets at home if we're isolated in the town for 2 or 3 weeks. So what can we as individuals do to be prepared? Preparedness begins at home. We all are taught that about putting together our go bags for ourselves and our family. You just need to make sure and include your pets as part of your family. And I think it's really important to have sort of 2 different caches of pet care supplies in your home. One, a go bag for evacuation that has 2 or 3 days worth of critical supplies, and a shelter in place supply. So assuming that you can stay at home, but we're trapped in our community and we're not able to get groceries, or the grocery store runs out quickly, enough supplies for at least 2 weeks at home and maybe longer. Adequate food and water, or ways to treat the water, a good supply of your pet's prescription medications, a first aid kit. And a first aid kit for your pets is really the same first aid kit for yourself. So there's you just need to kind of think about it when you're putting it together. It's really important to have documents that go along with your pet. So that could be copies of a written prescription in case you run out and you need to find a way to get refills. It is your medical records. It is your documentation of ownership, as well as bedding and supplies for travel. I'm sorry, my dog is behind me making some noise. So here's a list of things that I think are important to have in your pet go bag. And there is a written sheet with all this information available. Don't feel like you have to copy it all down, although if you want to just take a screenshot, you can. And I'm not going to go through it all, but as I mentioned, the important documents are really are vital. I mentioned or identification papers, and that would include something like the microchip number, if your pet has a microchip, which is a great idea, as well as the toll-free number to reach the company where your microchip is registered. A photo of your pet is really important, as well as a photo of you holding your pet, and I'll get to that in a moment. And then, emergency contacts like your veterinarian, like if for some reason you need to leave your pet at a local shelter and then you end up going elsewhere, we can't find you, someone to contact, for example, on the other side of the Coast Range. Those are all valuable things. And I think a fabric muzzle is a good thing to have for dogs, especially. They also make some muzzles that fit cats well. But even if your dog is the most docile dog in the world and wouldn't bite anyone, wouldn't harm a flea, if they are in a really stressful situation, or if they're in pain because they've been injured, the muzzle will both sort of distract them and calm them if they need to be treated, and protect you or the person providing the service, as well as a favorite toy or something that will be a comfort thing, just like you would bring for a child. You can also have pre-made, like an 8.5 by 11 poster if you get separated from your pet, that you can put up around a missing pet poster. And you can fill it out with the pet's name and basic information, and just leave a line where, like this, where you would handwrite in or fill in when they were last seen and your contact information. But I also mentioned a picture of you with your pet. And that's important if your pet ends up in a shelter somewhere and you show up and you say, I'm here for my pet. It is not likely that they would release the animal to someone that just says, I'm the owner. So if you have a picture that shows you with your pet together, that would be adequate evidence for them to release the pet to your care. So these are easy to find websites for some resources. A lot of them are sort of duplication of information. They have lists like the Go Bag and how to get ready. But the Oregon Veterinary Medical Association, OregonVMA.org, or the avma.org. It's not, this link will not take you directly to the disaster preparedness for pets information. You'll have to kind of go to the search, the little magnifying glass search thing and put in disaster and pet, but they all have really good links there with information for helping you. Like this brochure on the right, Saving the Whole Family, that is available at the AVMA. So once you're prepared with your own pets and helping your friends, family, neighbors, reminding them about the importance of having a go kit for their pets and being prepared. Just like the Pets Act, we want to have preparation to help care for the animals that are displaced or that people can't take care of. And we need to be prepared for rescuing them, recovering them, providing good shelter, and then ultimately, hopefully, reunifying them with their families. And if they're lost to their families for whatever reason, ultimately rehoming them to minimize the number of pets that end up getting euthanized. Portland Humane Society is amazing. They're an enormous no-kill shelter, and we in Portland take animals from all over the country in various disasters that the shelters are getting full and can't keep anymore, and they need to make space. And there are transport companies that will provide that service and get them on a plane and bring them to Portland. And the Portland shelter gets them and finds new homes for them, but you try really hard to get them back to their owners if possible. Something else that I think is would be a really good stopgap is people that are able to shelter in place, making space available for their friends and neighbors' pets, so they don't have to go into a shelter. We want to be prepared with shelters, but they have their own problems, having enough adequate staffing and care, having them where hopefully the owners in an adjacent shelter can take care of them. Most places, the people shelters like Red Cross shelters, you're not allowed to have pets in the same shelter area as you are, although the Red Cross is getting better about trying to have adjacent shelters so people can participate. But having other people in the community that are helping to provide short-term care for your pets would be a great thing to have kind of pre-arranged. For large animals, we would want to transport them out of the disaster area in trailers. But it's important that we have people that know animal behavior, know how to safely handle pet animals, especially in our community, and lots of different things to be aware of. And people know their own pets well, but they're not necessarily trained in dealing with pets in stressful situations or pets that are injured and anxious and painful and might be aggressive or fearful. And that's kind of where the DART team comes in. But we want to have all of the supplies necessary to take care of different species and protect them and protect ourselves. We want to, I talked about co-located shelters near the human shelters, or like getting them to the Humane Society, the animal shelter, where they're getting full care. It's certainly in a disaster, it's much better if we can keep them co-located so people can participate in their care, because I know we're going to be shorthanded. Lots of things to think about. Locations where shelters could be, schools, fairgrounds, veterinary clinics. Unfortunately, we don't have veterinary clinic here in Cannon Beach. And depending on, we're a very slim number of hospitals, veterinary hospitals along the North Coast here. So I don't think that's going to be a great solution. And if we're isolated from the communities to the north, we wouldn't be able to get to the Clatsop County Animal Shelter. But those are all things that need to be thought about. And I think everyone can probably see the cartoon, but it's has one dog saying to the other, "It may be a kennel to you, but it's a gated community to me." So this image shows a big small animal shelter that was set up at a disaster. Certainly something that could have been seen at one of the hurricanes. We know that the human-animal bond is incredibly powerful. And so there are absolute benefits, physical, emotional, psychosocial benefits to keeping their animals with their pets. The animals are calmer. The stress that we would all be dealing with in a crisis situation like that, the animals are so helpful to keep us, to give us the calming benefit, and have a focus to distract us. And certainly we need help caring for any animals that are moved into a shelter. And so having the owners help to care is great, but we also need trained volunteers. And again, long-term sheltering might be required, whether that's, a month, or, with people that are, we lose track of their pets, or the people are lost or had to move away. We could be dealing with long-term sheltering and eventually have to find a new situation for them. So a concern that always needs to be kept in mind is that people will want to try to re-enter their homes, and that's where things like the CERT team is helpful, and both keeping people out of unsafe structures, and helping to recover the animals if they're trained to enter buildings and the people aren't. So trained personnel can go into structures that have been deemed appropriate and recover the pets, as well as hopefully food and toys if possible. And again, reunification is really the ultimate goal. And so good record keeping, proper animal identification, just like the kind of record keeping we'll need to do with the victims that MRC might be taking care of. We need to have really good records of animals that are brought into a shelter for the community, for both for identification and checking them in and out of the shelter, but also for their health care, their feeding, their medical care, and keeping track of the owners and being able to get in touch. And again, owners might need time to prepare, so the animals might stay in the shelter longer, so that people can get a place ready to be reunified with their pets. And ultimately, if we can't reunify them, the hope is that we can find new homes for them. At the bottom, it says jurisdictions may already have a legal process in place, and that just depends on, if we can make connections with the animal control, if they're not overwhelmed, and work with them to find out what is the requirements in our community. So I've kind of sped through things tonight, but I want to just tell you a little bit about the disaster animal response team that we have here in Cannon Beach. There are similar teams around the country. Sometimes they're called DART, and sometimes they're called CART, community or county animal response teams. Sometimes they are a subsection of CERT, so every member is CERT trained and then gets additional training in the animal response. But it's people who want to volunteer and help with caring for the animals. And just like CERT and MRC, we don't self-deploy. We wait for our overseeing, supervising body, whether it's a government body like here, City of Cannon Beach, to deploy us. And then we have a structure that helps us stay organized and know how to take care of the animals. I really like to think of DART as a combination of CERT and MRC, because we will be providing some veterinary and medical care, but a lot of it will be just support, shelter management and maintenance especially. So the kind of things we do in DART are try to ensure adequate training, maintain the interest of our volunteers and try to keep involvement up, which can be a challenge sometimes, and certainly work within the guidelines that are given to us by emergency management and other bodies, depending on where a DART team is located. And with regard to the ICS courses, next Saturday, I'm going to be going through ICS 100 for people that haven't done it yet, and just to help kind of maybe reduce a little bit of the dryness that's involved when you try to get through it yourself, and make it a little bit easier to pass the final exam. So that'll be at the Cannon Beach Community Church next Saturday morning at 9:30, a week from tomorrow, if anyone's interested. We teach maybe every year or two safe animal handling, animal first aid and care. I give a course in zoonotic diseases, and we're still working on pet shelter training. We have a guest speaker or an invited person from the East Coast who's actually coming in May, who's going to spend Saturday teaching psychological first aid to our MRC team, and then Sunday teaching animal shelter training, kind of setup and management for the DART team, and certainly there's lots of overlap. And again, trying to maintain the volunteer interest, both with training and with social interactions and tabletop exercises and things like that. Practically speaking, the goals of the DART are to have us all better personally prepared and helping our family and friends, as I mentioned, to acquire enough pet shelter and care supplies to be able to take care of the pets if we do face that disaster someday. Safely storing food can be a challenge, because in Cannon Beach, where we may be isolated and not be able to have food brought in for a couple weeks, pet foods have a very limited shelf life. Dry foods, probably 6 to 12 months, especially in non-environmentally controlled environments like in the shipping containers where we store them. And so trying to figure out a way to rotate them has been a challenge. We want to develop a good shelter plan and then figure out how to achieve the goals and get enough money to make these purchases and do the training and everything. So as mentioned at the beginning, I started our DART in 2017. We were fortunate enough in 21 and 22 to get a grant through our MRC, because we know the importance of the animals to the human health, as I mentioned. That really gave us a boost on buying the shipping container and starting to get it well stocked. And now we're getting better at having meetings and trainings again after COVID. So things are starting to pick up. If anybody's interested in participating, we'd love volunteers, and it's really great for CERT volunteers to kind of be cross-trained. Again, these are the training classes that we offer, and have fun in the classes. Many of them are hands-on, and actually tomorrow we do this joint training, kind of a tabletop exercise with our MRC that we call pet and person drills, and we come up with patient care scenarios related to disasters, both for people and for pets. I don't need to read through this particular disaster, but it just, we kind of come up with a idea of what kind of injury an animal might have or illness, and then we talk about how to provide initial care, how you might follow up with the care, what their needs are, and what supplies we might need in our cache site to offer that care, both for the people and the pets. And that helps us identify what supplies we're missing so that we can add it to our want list. The kind of things we do that I think are fun, we have a table at Sandcastle Day in Cannon Beach. We offer information about the team and help reassure people that are visiting from out of town what we do for their pets, and also serves as a fundraiser, and we offer pet first aid in the tent right next to the MRC that's offering first aid for the people. And the things we do to maintain, other things we do to maintain interest and engagement, I mentioned Sandcastle. We participate in our 4th of July parade. We have an Earth Day parade in Cannon Beach. And just this last October, we had our first Halloween pet costume contest as a fundraiser for our disaster animal response team, and it was a lot of fun. We had, funniest costume and the best person and pet costume combined and things like that. And just a few pictures to wrap things up. We have 4 cache sites for disaster supplies around Cannon Beach. Tango, which is our southernmost cache site at the south end of Cannon Beach, is where we have most of our pet supplies. And we have a really large Connex shipping container. This is a 40-foot container. And inside, again, we've got multiple of the folding wire cages and lots of other supplies that we continue to add to. And then this is a list of what we have in the cache site right now. And again, it's ever expanding. And that's it. I think that it's great for people to be involved in the community and volunteer their time with whatever tickles them. If it's with DART or CERT or MRC or volunteering with the library or the food bank, I just think it's great to be a part of the community for lots of reasons, supporting your neighbors as well as the social benefits. So I'm happy to address questions. I hope that wasn't, I didn't jet through it too quickly.
This is Nancy. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Nancy.
Okay.
Where do you live?
Top secret. If I tell you, you know how that story goes. I'm wondering about zoonotic diseases and the prevalence of elk that we have. Should we be doing anything above and beyond the common sense things? Don't step in it, avoid it, leave your shoes at the door. Is there anything?
It's a good question. The risks, I think, from the elk are relatively low. Being, browsing herbivores, the kind of infections that they get are less likely to be ones that would spread to us versus omnivores or carnivores. But it's certainly you still want to use kind of common sense hygiene. And if you step in the elk poop, it's good to rinse your shoes off. Try to keep your pets from eating the elk poop,
Yeah.
things like that. We also have the bunnies in Cannon Beach, and
Yeah.
I actually think that's maybe a little bit, even though they're mostly herbivores, there are some diseases that they're known to carry and spread in their urine, like I think it's listeria, maybe leptospirosis as well.
Mm.
That's interesting.
So, but yeah, definitely the elk are getting more bold as their numbers are increasing, and
Mhm.
people are not treating them like wild animals. People are going up in their faces with their phone cameras, and the animals are getting acclimated to the people. And I think that actually is a bad thing and probably adds to risk down the road. Do you guys have elk coming in the community down in Manzanita?
We do have a herd, and they hang out usually at the golf course and walk around. But it doesn't seem as overwhelming as it does when I hear stories about Cannon Beach or other towns where was it where they shot a whole bunch of them?
Gearhart.
Earhart.
Yeah, Gerhart. Yeah, I don't think it's anything like that. I mean, and we do have the Halem Bay State Park where they hang out too.
Mhm.
Mhm. That seems like a good place for them in the woods.
It's just getting harder and harder to avoid walking in the excrement.
I
Um,
I think it happens though, we're taking away so much of their habitat.
oh, of course.
It's just terrible. Like there's like, where do they go? It's almost like we're seeing bobcats now and
Oh, yeah.
cougars,
Coyote.
all kinds of animals, just because I think we're just taking over more and more of the forest.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we are seeing more coyotes in Cannon Beach. But I also, I mean, for a long time they were, as an example, killing the wolves in Yellowstone and to extinction. There were no more wild wolves in that area. And in the I don't know how many years since they started reintroducing them, if it's been 20, 15, 20, but it's amazing how it helps to balance the environment, and so many other animals are healthier. They control the population of animals that would overgraze. New trees are coming back that haven't been seen in the park forever. It's kind of similar to our starfish wasting disease that we've had on the coast, and without the
Mhm.
starfish, the mussels are going berserk
Yeah.
and destroying lots of the what kelp beds and
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
other environment, and where other animals need to live, and it affects them. So it's just, I think, so fascinating how
Yeah.
it's all part of the balance of nature, and they provide an important component to the environment.
Bob,
Yes.
this is Bob Fuller from Seaside.
Hi, Bob.
First of all, thank you so much for your help today in the CERT training. It was invaluable. Is there a similar type of DART training to what we've been going through with the CERT training?
Like an intensive training?
Specific, course material, training, hands-on.
I've been offering the training in little dribs and drabs.
Okay.
One class here, one lecture there, one hands-on experience, 6 months later. There are places in the country that have intensive training down in, I think, in or around the area of Chico, California. There's a really active DART team, and I think they have like a weekend type, 2 8-hour days of training to get like their CERT team that want to be also on the DART team trained. And I've, kind of had some interest in going through it myself to see what they offer and maybe bring it back here, but I haven't done so yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob Fuller.
Yes,
Bob Kroll does a really great job with the zoonotic diseases. And then there's first aid. So it's not one big program, but he offers lots of individual pertinent things.
I'm certainly excited about the speaker that's coming in May that's going to go through shelter training with us in Cannon Beach with the team, because that's something I've been wanting to do but just haven't gotten around to putting a course together.
I feel Cannon Beach is so lucky because, here in Manzanita, it would be wonderful. And we have so many, animals and people who really love animals to have
Mhm.
something similar. I agree. It would be nice to have like a training where people can come and actually form, a Tullahoma County DART as well.
Yeah.
Because you
Well,
raised so many questions in this presentation, like the whole thing of like, especially the kennels, like,
Yeah.
I mean, that seems so important to have to fold down kennels, a whole bunch of them, so that
Yeah.
when, disaster strikes, you have someplace to put the animals.
There are kind of statewide disaster animal response teams that
Mhm.
would be deployed, by the state to different disasters like wildfires. Although I've never participated just because they've never been the opportunity, but I'm part of a statewide team called OVERT, OVERT, Oregon Veterinary Emergency Response Team. And they, show up with a trailer that has full of supplies with cages and medical supplies and things to a disaster, and they find a location to set up like a clinic and that kind of thing. But it's so different in our environment and the circumstance. If we have a Cascadia event, it's going to be the possibly the worst natural disaster in American history. And we're not going to have people coming here to help us because they're going to be, trying to help people in the big cities, and they may not even be able to get here. So I kind of have to look at it very differently and try to have what we need on site. Something else I wish that I had was another veterinarian or two and a bunch of veterinary technicians that had that particular skill set that would share that with me as part of the team. We've got great volunteers. We've got people that have worked as veterinary technicians, a couple in their past, people that have volunteered at animal shelters, and people that have pets and love their pets. And, but there are different skills that come with different, just like you guys at the Nehalem Bay Emergency Volunteer Corps, you've got all kinds of skill sets that people can
Mhm.
contribute, whether it's accounting and bookkeeping and engineering and
Yes.
administrative things and medical care and organizational skills and water sanitation and hygiene. And it's you guys are really impressive in that regard.
Yeah.
So
May I say one more thing and then
Yeah.
I'll stop talking? Going back to my comments about the dogs walking in the excrement and whatnot, I'm not saying we've got too many elk. I'm saying I want to step up my hygiene program. They deserve to be here, so it's not about them. But I was just wondering if there's something that I should be doing to be the safest as possible.
I guess if you wanted to be as safe as possible, we wear our kind of muck boots on the beach sometimes because we're walking through crossing the rivers and things and just wearing waterproof. But just like if you were to go into an isolation unit at the hospital,
Yeah.
or you were invited to tour, whether it's a research medical facility or it's to go into somebody's barn, and they don't want diseases from other farms brought onto their property. They have like, at least at a minimum, kind of a foot bath that you walk through disinfectant solution, and you could have something like that at your back door. Or you get home and you rinse off your shoes and,
Leave them outside.
leave them outside and rinse them off at the, you could spray them with a weak bleach solution if you wanted to, or soap and water. But, it just like, COVID, so much of it comes down to really getting in the habit of washing your hands well. That can protect us from so many things.
Okay.
Well, this was
Okay.
wonderful, Bob. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. This was just a lot of information, really good information.
Well, I no pun intended, but I kind of zoomed through it. Hopefully there'll be people that want to watch the recording, since we didn't have a huge turnout tonight. Because I do think it's really good information, and I think people are interested. So many people love their pets and want to do what they can for them. So again, I think I mentioned it, but if you either they go and grab them next time they go to the veterinary hospital, or you want to suggest to your CERT team that they purchase some inexpensive disposable dog leashes and a little Ziploc of treats.
Well, I didn't even know that was such a thing.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost like a little loop leash. Let's see.
Strap.
Yeah.
And that's what they're called, if you look them up, disposable dog leashes.
Like if you went onto Amazon and you looked up loop leash, maybe, or even if you just looked up leash, or I don't know, but I bought them for us at like a package of 100 for $20 or something.
Okay.
They're
We
just
stopped to rescue.
yeah. And if you
several
go to
dogs.
most veterinarians have them hanging by the counter for people that forget to bring a leash, and they have advertising on them for that hospital, so they expect you to take one or two home, I guess. And so grab a couple. As Nancy said, we keep them in our car and have rescued lots of animals that we found wandering on the streets when we're driving down the road, because we have a way to control them.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. Right. You're just saying goodnight, Bob. Oh, you're muted. I
Thank
see
you, again, Bob. It was great.
You're welcome. I'll see you tomorrow.
Oh, glad to see you tomorrow. Thank
Yep, I won't be there until late, because I have MRC things scheduled first thing in the morning, but I'll see you probably 11-ish.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
and
you
I'll
for putting it together.
see you, Matt, tomorrow too. I
Yeah.
think. And Nancy, I'll see you tomorrow, if not sooner.
I hope so.
Thank you for inviting me, Ivana.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank-
Good
Good
night.
night,
Oh, and
everybody.
so certainly once you get the recording figured out and have a link to it, if you could send it to me, and then I can
Totally.
send it out on my end as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much,
Thank
guys.
you.